The first clue was hidden inside a bank transfer that wasn't supposed to exist. I wasn't snooping. At least, that's what I still tell myself. 3 years ago, my life looked painfully ordinary. I was married to Emma. We had been together for 14 years, married for 11. We had 2 kids, a mortgage, and the kind of routine people complain about but secretly depend on. I worked in logistics. Emma worked part-time at a dental clinic. Nothing about our lives screamed disaster. If someone had asked me then whether I trusted my wife, I would have laughed at the question. Trust wasn't something I thought about. It was like breathing. It was just there. Looking back, that's probably why I missed every warning sign. The strange thing was that it started with money. One evening I was reviewing our finances because we were planning a kitchen renovation. Emma hated dealing with numbers, so I usually handled everything. Most transactions were exactly what I expected. Groceries, utilities, school expenses. Then I noticed several transfers. Small amounts. Never more than a few $100s. Different dates. Different descriptions. At first glance they looked completely normal. A hidden transaction is money that moves unnoticed. And these had been moving unnoticed for nearly 2 years. I remember staring at the screen, feeling something I couldn't explain. Not fear. Not suspicion. Just a tiny crack in a picture that had always seemed perfect. I almost closed the laptop and forgot about it. Sometimes I wish I had died. I told myself it was nothing. That's the part one still can't forgive in myself. The next morning, I opened the bank app again, almost like I expected the numbers to rearrange themselves overnight and make sense. They didn't. If anything, there were more of those transfers when I looked closer. Same pattern. Same small amounts. Same careful spacing, like whoever was doing it didn't want to trigger attention. I asked Emma casually over breakfast if she had been moving money around for something. She didn't even look up from the table. No, why? That was it. Simple. Clean. No hesitation. And I believed her. Or I wanted to. But something inside me didn't settle. It wasn't loud or dramatic. Just a quiet discomfort, like a chair slightly off balance. Later that day, I checked the joint account again from my phone during lunch break. I started noting dates, times, patterns. And then I saw something that made my stomach tighten. Every single transfer lined up with nights Emma said she was too tired for anything but sleep. Back then, I still didn't want the truth. But I was already starting to see it. I started doing something I told myself I'd never do in a marriage. I began tracking her life in silence. Not in an obvious way. Nothing dramatic. Just small observations that I pretended didn't mean anything. She started working late, twice a week. Then 3 times. Then it became normal. I noticed she became protective of her phone in a way she never used to be. She'd angle the screen away when I entered the room. Take calls in the bathroom. Smile at messages she wouldn't explain. Every detail on its own had an innocent explanation. That's what made it dangerous. Because nothing ever looked wrong enough to accuse her of anything, but together it felt like a pattern forming under my skin. One evening, I remember she came home later than usual. She kissed the kids, then me, but it felt mechanical. Like she was performing something rehearsed. I asked where she had been. Work, she said again. Same word. Same tone. But that night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about those transfers. About how a hidden transaction is money that moves unnoticed, and how maybe my whole life had been moving the same way. Quiet. Invisible. Until someone finally looks close enough. The turning point didn't come with shouting or drama. It came with silence. Emma fell asleep early that night, exhausted in a way I didn't understand anymore. Her phone stayed on the kitchen counter while she showered. I remember standing there longer than I should have, just looking at it like it was something dangerous. I told myself I wouldn't touch it. I did anyway. There was no password change. That was the first thing that struck me. almost like she didn't expect me to ever look. Messages were there. Too many to ignore. A thread saved under a name I didn't recognize. At first it was harmless, work talk, jokes, small exchanges. Then I scrolled further. My hands started shaking before I even reached the worst part. I transferred it. Like we agreed. Just don't tell him. My throat went dry. Another message followed. Next time, we need to be more careful with the hidden transactions. He checks the account sometimes. I stopped breathing properly after that. The money wasn't random. It wasn't just cheating. It was planned. Organized. And I was the only one not supposed to see it. I don't remember sitting down, but at some point I was on the kitchen floor holding her phone like it weighed more than I could carry. My mind kept trying to reject what I had read, like it was a language I didn't speak properly. Like we agreed. That line kept repeating. We. Not me and Emma. We and someone else. When she came out of the shower, I was still there. I think she immediately knew something was wrong. That's the thing about long relationships, you don't need words to feel when the air has changed. She asked what I was doing. I didn't answer at first. I just looked at her. Then I asked quietly, "Who is it?" She froze. Just for a second. But I saw it. That split second where truth decides whether to stay hidden or come out. "Who is who?" she tried. I showed her the phone. The color drained from her face, not suddenly, but slowly, like something inside her was shutting down. And in that moment, I realized I wasn't dealing with a mistake. I was dealing with something she had been living with on purpose. She didn't sit down right away. She just stood there in her towel, staring at the phone like it had betrayed her instead of the other way around. Then she said my name. Softly. Like she was trying to anchor me back into something familiar. "I can explain," she finally said. That sentence. I've heard it in movies, in stories, in other people's disasters. I never thought it would sound like a warning in my own kitchen. I asked her again, sharper this time. "Explain the money. The messages. The we you keep talking about." She exhaled like she was exhausted, not guilty. That was what made me angry first. Not panic. Not shame. Just this quiet exhaustion in her voice, like I was interrupting something she had been managing carefully for a long time. "It's not what you think," she said. I laughed once. I didn't mean to. Because I had already read enough to know that phrase only exists when it absolutely is what you think. She sat down finally. And that's when she said the name of the man I had never heard before. His name didn't mean anything to me at first. That's the strangest part of betrayal. How something that destroys your life can arrive as just a sound, a collection of letters you've never attached meaning to. Emma said it carefully, like she was testing how it would land. A colleague. Then not just a colleague. Someone she trusted. Someone who understood things I didn't. I kept staring at her, waiting for the part where this would become less real. It didn't. Instead, she started talking faster, like if she kept moving the words, I wouldn't be able to hold on to any of them. "It started," she said, "months ago. Late nights at work. Shared stress. Conversations that turned personal. Then emotional. Then physical. And then the money. That's where everything changed shape for me." She said he was in trouble financially. That she was helping. Small transfers at first. Then more structured ones. Hidden transactions, routed carefully so they wouldn't show obvious patterns. "I didn't think it would become this," she said. But she had already built it with him. And I was the one paying for it without knowing. I asked her the question I probably shouldn't have asked. "Were you ever going to tell me?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked down at her hands like the answer was written somewhere in her skin, and she just hadn't learned how to read it aloud. That silence said more than anything she could have spoken. Then she admitted there were things I still didn't know. That was the moment something inside me shifted. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just a quiet internal collapse, like a floor giving way under furniture that had been there too long. There were more transfers than I had seen. Some from accounts I didn't even check. Savings I thought we were building together had been partially redirected. And the worst part wasn't even the money anymore. It was how carefully it had been hidden. How many small decisions it took. How many normal days had to exist on top of lies for it to stay invisible. I kept thinking about that phrase again. A hidden transaction is money that moves unnoticed. Except now it wasn't just money. It was our entire life. After she finished talking, there was a stretch of time where neither of us moved. The apartment felt different, like it had been reclassified into something less safe. Familiar objects suddenly looked like evidence. The couch. The table. Even the kids' drawings on the fridge felt like they belonged to another version of my life. I asked her if she loved him. That question came out more broken than I expected. She hesitated again. That hesitation did more damage than a clear answer ever could. I don't know, she said finally. That was worse than yes. I remember nodding like I understood, even though I didn't understand anything anymore. Not her. Not myself. Not how you spend over a decade building something that can still contain a second life you never see. She started crying then, but it didn't feel like a resolution. It felt like an aftershock. I told her to stop explaining. Because every explanation was just another version of the same truth I couldn't accept. She didn't argue. She just sat there, holding herself together in pieces. And I realized I wasn't angry in a way I could fix. I was already past that point. The next morning, I woke up before her. Or maybe I didn't really sleep at all. I remember sitting in the kitchen again, staring at the same table where she had told me everything, thinking how quickly a place can become a crime scene without anything physically breaking. The kids were still asleep. That was the only normal thing left in the house. Emma came out later, dressed like nothing had happened. That almost broke me more than the confession. She made coffee. She asked if I wanted some. Like we were still inside the same life. I told her I needed space. She nodded too quickly, like she had already prepared for that sentence. There was no fight. No dramatic collapse. Just this slow, controlled distance forming between us while we both pretended we didn't feel it happening. I went through the bank statements again after she left for work. This time I wasn't looking for proof. I was looking for scale. How long? How much? How far it went? And every number felt like another version of betrayal I hadn't known existed. I started sleeping in the spare room after that. At least, I tried to sleep. Most nights I just lay there listening to the house settle around me, trying to understand how two people can share a home and still live in completely different versions of reality. Emma didn't push. That was almost worse. She gave me space like someone carefully stepping around broken glass, except I was the one shattered and she was the one choosing the distance. We still spoke about the kids. School. Meals. Logistics. Everything practical. Nothing emotional survived past the surface. One evening, I asked her why she didn't just leave if she was already building another life. She looked at me for a long time before answering. I didn't plan it like that, she said. But everything she described before that moment told a different story. Planning without naming it. Choosing without admitting it. Living inside something that only became real when it collapsed. I kept thinking about the phrase she used again. We agreed. And I realized I wasn't even sure when I stopped being part of that agreement. The hardest part wasn't the betrayal itself. It was the afterlife of it. How normal everything still looked from the outside. School runs. Grocery lists. Birthday reminders. People at work asking how my wife was, and me saying, good, without thinking, because what else do you say when your reality has split in two? Emma and I started moving like strangers who knew each other's habits too well to collide. We coordinated the house like colleagues. Efficient. Careful. Empty. Then one night, I checked the accounts again. Not because I wanted to. Because I couldn't stop. The transfers were still there, even after everything had been exposed. Smaller now. Cleaner. Almost like someone had tried to erase fingerprints but forgot the stains. That's when I understood something I hadn't accepted before. It hadn't stopped. It had just changed shape. I confronted her again that night. Not loudly. I didn't have the energy for that anymore. I just asked, "Is it still going on?" And she didn't answer right away. That silence told me everything I needed. She finally admitted it wasn't exactly going on the same way anymore. That was her wording. Not mine. She said the emotional part had ended. That things between them had changed after everything came out. But there were still financial ties. Loose ends. Obligations she couldn't just erase overnight. I remember laughing again, but it came out empty. Because apparently betrayal has stages now. Like grief. Like recovery. As if there's a structured way to dismantle a second life you built while still living in your first. I asked her what I was supposed to do with that information. She didn't have an answer. Instead, she said she wanted to fix things. That she had already started distancing herself. That she was trying to correct it. But I kept thinking about how carefully it had all been constructed in the first place. Hidden transactions don't happen by accident. Neither do years of silence. Later that night, I sat alone and realized something that scared me more than anger. I wasn't competing with another man anymore. I was competing with a version of my own life that had already been rewritten without me. I started noticing how often I replayed everything in my head, like if I could find the exact moment where it all became irreversible. Was it the first hidden transfer? The first late night? Or was it earlier, when I stopped asking questions because life felt stable enough not to interrogate it? Emma tried to act normal again. She really did. She made dinners. Asked about the kids' homework. Sat next to me on the couch like proximity alone could rebuild trust. But there's a kind of distance that doesn't shrink with effort. It just becomes more visible. One night she said she missed us. I didn't know how to respond to that word anymore. Us felt like something that existed in a different timeline. I told her I needed to think about what I wanted. She nodded, but her eyes told me she already knew where this was heading. The financial part still haunted me too. Not just the betrayal, but the precision of it. The hidden transactions weren't chaotic. They were organized. Deliberate. And that's what I couldn't stop seeing. Not a mistake. A system. The final break didn't happen with a fight. It happened with distance that slowly stopped pretending it was temporary. We tried for a while after that. Or at least we called it trying. Conversations that went nowhere. Therapy sessions that felt like translating pain into polite sentences. Nights where we sat in the same room but spoke like we were careful not to trigger anything explosive. But something essential had already left. One evening, I checked the account again without thinking. The habit was still there, like muscle memory I couldn't delete. The hidden transactions were gone now, or maybe disguised better. Cleaned up. Rewritten. That's when I realized I would never trust what I couldn't fully see again. Emma eventually moved into a rented place nearby. For the kids, she said. For stability. We told people we separated. Amicably. It sounded almost like a lie that could heal itself if repeated enough times. But the truth is quieter. It doesn't resolve. It just stays. Sometimes I still think about that phrase she used. We agreed. And I wonder how many versions of my life existed without me ever being asked to sign off on them.